Thank you again. And now please welcome Woody Winfree to our pulpit.
Thanks. I'm really happy to be here. Honoring our veterans and those who gave the greatest sacrifice of their lives was first encoded in 1868 by Congress as a day of observance. The second article of this vow of public remembrance reads, quote, "Greater strides must be made to demonstrate appreciation for those loyal of the United States whose values, represented by their sacrifices, are critical to the future of the United States." End quote. I can only begin this 2024 commemoration of service by speaking to the fact that we are in a tough place of disunited states. Our future is in question. We have not been more divided as a nation since the Civil War that risk irreparably fracturing this nation in two. Red, blue, progressive, conservative, north, south, east, west. We are at war as a nation. And it is one that could do the same irreparable harm. And to dissect this very disturbing state of national conflict is a conversation for other places. But I think the integrity of this holiday requires us to draw attention to the second article conferred by both houses of Congress. Consideration of the personal values of our war dead as being critical to the future of the United States. I think this begs a critical question of all of us. Are our neighbor-to-neighbor conflicts in keeping with the values of our veterans who fought and died for us? I believe that as spiritually centered, responsible citizens, we are commanded to work harder and do better to lift this country closer to its founding ideals that veterans have served and died for. My intention today is to share thoughts, stories, and experiences that I hope inspire and ignite our debt of gratitude. Some of my ways of doing this is to tug at heartstrings, to heighten awareness of making good out of the always devastation of war, and to stimulate, if not new ways of thinking, maybe new ways of remembering. Each of us is a star in the sky, a beacon of light that illuminates the best potential of this country. Less war, less conflict, less ideological divisiveness, more love, more diplomacy, more compromise for the greater good of all, and more honor for those who have given their service and died so that we can hold this united nation. I am part of the vast majority of Americans who have little or no connection or association to the huge military complex. My dad served in the Navy in World War II. My uncle was a career officer, and my second cousin, a Vietnam vet who served in, of all lucky places, Alaska. 3 people out of 41 million US citizens who have served in our military is my connection. To my knowledge, I don't have an ancestor or know of anyone who knew anyone of the million service members who have died in service to this country. But I can lay claim that it is built deeply into my bones to know how to pause and acknowledge and offer gratitude to every one of those 40 million citizens who have defended this nation. This background of military connection leaves me deeply humbled and more than a little chagrined to be standing here offering this, my first ever formal acknowledgement of Memorial Day. I love this country, and I'm not naive about the necessity for a strong military. But it wasn't until after saying yes to this invitation to present today that I recognized, those conflicting emotions about war. I imagine that some of you, share those sentiments, but I really want to just claim these as my personal values for the sake of this conversation. Another reflection of my values is the belief that when we are respectfully critical of our country's actions, in war and otherwise, we are paying a type of honor to those who served that is equal to every other kind of honor paid to them. My expression of this respect will be to share stories that may touch and crack our hearts open a bit. That is my intention. But my intention from tapping into this deeper well of experience is really for two things. One, to reckon honestly with the complexity of being citizens of a country that has gone to war 12 times in our short 248-year history. That's almost every 2 decades. And the last 3 of these wars, Vietnam, Afghanistan, and Iraq, have lasted 20 years. We cannot change our history, but we can engage our hearts and actions to be a voice for the future. One kind of honoring is this. It's gathering together in community, and as Penny said, giving voice to the other's thoughts, values, hearts, sorrows, joys, and coming together to share grief, to share love, to share hope. Inwardly, my personal measure of honoring the sacrifices made is to not fall asleep in this very busy and distracting culture, but rather to be a keen observer of what is in front of me and holding close what touches me and informs me, and to share that with my children and others around me. When I do this, I like to share what I see, obviously, that's what I just said, but I'm a storyteller. My purpose in life is to affect social change and expand consciousness using the right language, hopefully, at the right time and in the needed places. And that is what I come to share today, stories and impressions that reflect my commitment and my love for this country. I have a bit of a show and tell going on today. And part of my intention for that is to impress you to stand in your own home among your own artifacts of your life and memories, and to build conscious, active, ongoing, daily, weekly relationship with those memories and the remembering of what is important and sacred. The Coldplay video was a physical experience of the expression that I wanted to impart. That it's complicated, but it's all about love. And the energy that we bring to it lays the foundation. My second share is a story about Major Richard Hawthorne, who disappeared in the jungles of Southeast Asia when I was 12 years old. When I was 16 and just beginning to develop political awareness, I started the first year of 4 years that I wore his memorial bracelet that bears his name and the date that he went missing in action, September 12th, 1967. These bracelets became a symbol of honoring the fallen and the hope to bring them home. But they also proliferated from the initially grassroots creation to millions or thousands, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of bracelets worn by citizens of this country as a strong statement for bringing an end to this war and to question why we were there. And while I don't come across it every day by any means, I have come across it for 53 years as I dig in a drawer looking for something. And every single time over those 53 years, when I have stumbled across it, I cup it in my hand, and I pause, and I offer a prayer of gratitude to Major Richard Hawthorne's service. And I think of his family and their dashed dreams and their great loss that can never be filled. This bracelet is an important touchstone for me to remember and give honor to the 58,209 soldiers who gave their lives in the Vietnam War. My third offering is a story that took place in a small medieval French village 24 years ago. On a starkly quiet Sunday morning, my husband and daughter and I walked through the cobblestone streets of Les Carènes with not one other person in sight. Out of seemingly nowhere, we heard a woman calling out in French accented English, "Hello, hello, are you Americans?" We looked around as the question kept being repeated. When we finally looked up the face of this stone building and a woman leaning out the windowsill over into the street, and we replied yes to her, "We are." And she said, "Well, then you must come up for coffee and cake." And we did. The crux of the story was her emotional telling of being a little girl hanging out of that same window when American forces entered her little town as liberators from the Nazis who had occupied France during World War II. As tears ran down her face and she told her story, I registered like never before and never quite again how respected and revered the Americans were for our contributions in that war. I've repeated this story many times over the years, and every time I do, I pause to pay my respects to the 409,399 soldiers who died in service in the Second World War. My fourth reflection is an expression of gratitude to the more than 6,000 female nurses who served in Vietnam and the 8 who lost their lives doing so. In a long ago chapter of my life, I was committed to telling stories that had the power to redefine feminine beauty in our culture. No small task. A culture that really overly prizes young, white, thin, and impossibly perfect as the measure of beauty. The result was this book, I Am Beautiful, a collection of 99 women's pictures and essays offering their responses to the very simple yet extremely difficult question, why are you beautiful? Today, I will read a submission by Dana from Chicago, a Vietnam nurse, Army nurse, and here she is pictured in her decades-old fatigues, posing in front of the Vietnam Memorial in Washington. Here is her story. Try as I might, I am not able to say anything about beauty that is more meaningful to me than the few lines I wrote nearly 3 decades ago as a 20-year-old Army nurse in Vietnam. Like swans on still water, they skim over the war. Adwa, gliding, rustling, serenely gleaming black hair pulled primly away from their faces that reveal nothing save in a repose, a beauty so deep, even war can't defile it. I note my reflection in their obsidian eyes, an outsized barbarian, ungainly, unkempt, baggy, and ever-wilted greens, 5-pound boots taking plow hand strides, face perpetually ruddy, dripping in alien heat. In their delicate presence, I exhume teenage failures. The girl in the back row, forever unnoticed. The one no one ever invited to dance. The one never voted likely to be anything. The one who was never quite something enough. But once in a while, on a crazy shift morning when I've worked through the night and I'm too tired to care, a young man who reeks of rice paddies lies waiting for someone to heal the new hole in his life. He says through his pain, all adolescent bravado, "Hey, what's your name? Let's get married. I love you." And just for a moment, I become Nefertiti, and for all the Orient's pearls and silks, I would not change the glamour and privilege of these honored hands, licensed to touch one filthy GI. To really, really, really understand her deep sentiments and the horrid and less glorious realities of the contribution these nurses made, I really recommend the new novel by Kristen Hanna entitled The Women. Although fiction, this novel is factually researched account of the nurses who served in the war and the dishonoring of their service that they and almost every service member experienced when they returned to America that had tired of this war. My fifth account is one of our two 20th century wars and the hope for preventing one. It is represented by this broken stick, painted like many more here by the UU committee members who opposed our invasion of Iraq. This particular one was painted by my mother, who served maybe with some of you on the peace committee. And this is one of many peace sticks that were placed around Jacksonville. The clear message was, no, it is not a match to America's principles to invade a country that has not displayed aggression against us. This message and its memory through this stick was planted in my garden for 20 years, where it remained during our occupation of Iraq. And it was there long before the peace laddering wore out of it and that the burrowing bugs ate through it and it fell over, broken in half. But I will hang on to this for the rest of my life. And I will leave it behind with this story for my children and my grandchildren. I want them to remember their maternal ancestors' commitment to peace and a commitment to principled decisions by our leaders when called to war. And my final story is about this flag. This flag flew over the U.S. Capitol on the day that my husband became a naturalized citizen of the United States. In his own way, he was the tired, the hungry, and among the huddled masses who yearned to breathe free. He was born into an authoritarian country and was on the precipice of being inducted into the South African Army for protesting against apartheid as a college student. In addition to his risky moral stance against the brutal segregationist government, his long experience living in that country had informed him that his being Jewish left him at great risk of disappearing into that army and never being seen again. My husband and my life are beneficiaries of the freedom and opportunities that are afforded in this country, and that so many have offered their service and given their lives to protect. My family is eternally grateful. The greatest honor that we pay, I don't know, if not every day, of course not every day, but often, consistently, is with our participatory citizenship, our speaking out, our flying our flag, even in the face of, you know, what the flag kind of represents today, like who gets to carry it, who gets to love it, who gets to own it. And that is something we're protecting. I hope these stories move you to pause today, to remember and reflect today, tomorrow, and days into the future of how fragile this democracy is and who we owe the honor to deeply for their service to protecting it. Thank you.